even in deity worship, what is practical and convenient in India may not be in the West. So in America and Western Europe, you should just, you can change things so they're convenient for the people of that place and time. And so what's interesting is all of Prabhupada's many, many, many statements authorizing all that I'm doing, they're not famous in ISKCON. The statements that become famous are all the ones that sort of lead to Indian chauvinism, or the statements that bash the West and promote India, and somehow those are the ones that are talked about. And there's this huge body of statements of Prabhupada authorizing us to do everything we're doing, and no one knows it. It's been filtered out, and it's right there in the database. It's right from Prabhupada. Half the time it's in his books, and no one knows about it. And it's not preached, it's not taught, it's filtered out. And it leads to these absurd outcomes. For example, the eternal Vedic sannyas dress, which, number one, Lord Chaitanya never used. Look at the covers of our books. Number two, the sannyas dhoti that we use comes from the Ramakrishna mission. Bhaktisiddhanta used it, so it goes back to the time of Bhaktisiddhanta. And he adopted it because they were very popular in India during his time. It's not Vedic, not from the scriptures. It's just he took it from this bogus group. The kurta is an Arab word meaning shirt. It's an Arabic. It's a Muslim shirt. The kurta. Half the preparations, the only ones Krishna likes, they come from Turkey. You go on, you can go on and on and on. There's this there's this myth of Vedic culture.
Yeah, just when I was in Germany now, my Guru Maharaj Swami was in class. He mentioned that the reason why we dress as we dress is not because of the clothes and how it looks, but to evoke this devotional mood, and so we should dress to invoke a devotional atmosphere. And that's why, we choose these.
I respect that, but, for a lot of people, it invokes the opposite. Once I started teaching this, my Krishna West thing, thousands of people are saying, thank God, now I can actually feel devotional because I'm not being forced to be someone I'm not. In other words, if someone feels that I feel more Krishna conscious when I use Indian dress, and that's what it is. It's not Vedic. It's Indian dress. And if someone just feels, for whatever reason, that I like it, I feel better, then use it. But what's wrong is to say, first of all, Prabhupada didn't even use the term devotional dress. That came from the devotees, from us, not Prabhupada. Prabhupada was asked, why do we wear these Indian clothes? Prabhupada said it was your idea. I never said you had to do it. When I was in India back in the 70s and everyone wore dhotis, and I noticed that Indian converts to Christianity would wear a suit and tie because that was Christian dress. And so what we find is it's not about history or scripture, it's just human psychology. That if you have a powerful conversion experience in any tradition, and you're taught from the beginning that this dress is a sacred dress, you come to associate your spiritual feelings with that dress. And so someone may just like it. For example, Ananta Swami, who was a very dear friend and brother of mine, he may just, maybe it just works for him. It's just, he's comfortable. It makes, it's just his natural way of being.
Does it create, if everyone in a certain context?
It makes some people feel more Krishna conscious, and it makes a lot of people feel less Krishna conscious.
He didn't mention specific, you have to wear sari or dhoti, but just that you consciously wear something that will invoke.
You know what invokes my mood? My devotional mood. And this is just me. I don't say I'm better than someone else. It's just me. When I dress normally, kind of sort of retro 50s. But when I dress as a normal, respectable person, it makes me feel more Krishna conscious because it makes me feel that I can more easily, that the people I'm trying to help will be more comfortable with me. Because you see, what I'm going for, there's a cultural space in the West where it is for the lone sadhu. You know, the holy man, the Dalai Lama, or Radhanath Swami. You know, it's just like it's the saint or the holy man or the holy woman, like Mother Teresa. And so Western culture has a space for that. And you'll be respected, you can be on television, you can do this, you can do that. But there is not a space for the group. And so you have to leave the group behind. You can become a spiritual celebrity. You know, the individual can have a certain, celebrity and speak here and there. But the people who are attracted to the lone saint are not going to join that community. They're not going to actually join a community where everyone's like that. They're just going to, it's something for the individual. And so what I decided in my life, this is my own strategy. Everyone has their own strategy. The strategy I'm favoring is I don't want to be the lone saint. I mean, I could do that. I could, be on television all over the world, blah, blah, blah. But it's not interesting to me. What I want to do is to try to set an example and encourage others to set an example so people can actually follow us. There are different kinds of attention. For example, if you go out on the street, everyone's dressed in dhotis and saris and dance and drums and twirl around. Sure, you may get a crowd, and they may even applaud or take pictures. But if you went out dressed in traditional, Polynesian dress from the South Pacific, or Mexican, or Nigerian, or Tibetan, or this or that, you get the same crowd, the same applause, and they take the same pictures. For example, they're doing the super festival of India, like the Festival of India on steroids is in Poland. And they don't make devotees. Because there's a kind of attention where you entertain people. I don't want to just entertain people. I want them to follow. I want them to join us, join our community, help us to save the planet. That's the kind of attention I want. Not just like, wow, that's so exotic, it's so colorful. Where you guys been? That's the kind of attention I want.
But doesn't the holy name in itself, that has an effect? Just
not nearly as much as we think.
No?
No, Krishna says that. I'm quoting Krishna. Because, I'm glad. It's like, oh my God.
I'm sorry, I'm asking all this.
No, you're a beautiful young lady. I'm glad you're asking. It's Krishna says in the last verse of chapter 17 of the Gita, a verse which apparently I'm the only one that reads, but Krishna says, Shraddhaya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chajat asariti uchate partha natchatat preti noiha. Any religious activity or spiritual activity performed without faith has very little effect. So, agyata sukriti is our flag, It means in Sanskrit, unknown good deed, literally. Like, for example, Hare Krishna devotees are chanting on the street. You walk by, you're not interested in Hare Krishna, you just walk by and you hear it because it's loud. And so, because you heard Krishna's name, you become purified. And now, you're... Yes, but so it works, or someone just eats spiritual food, but not enough to make a successful spiritual movement. We sold tens of millions of books in the United States. Tens of millions of Prabhupada's books. We chanted everywhere. And the result? The movement collapsed. So what I'm saying is, another point, hammering her, got her. In the look at that. Just see, it's another abusive guru, pushing the women around. In the Upadeshamrita, Rupa Goswami says that niyama agraha, that if you think that the result of bhakti comes automatically, mechanically, by doing this and that, it will destroy your bhakti. So how can we, if he says that, in other words, if you're practicing bhakti yoga, no, I got up on time, I chanted, I did this, I did that, I'll automatically get the result. Rupa Goswami says that will destroy your bhakti. And yet that's our strategy for the world. They will be mechanically, involuntarily, unconsciously saved. And what we're finding in the real world, not the, I don't know, you call it the wonderland, that most devotees live in. They just went right through the rabbit hole and they're in this wonderland where we're doing. But in the real world, it's not working.
I actually brought this point up to one of my godbrothers, about that mechanical part, and then he said, "No, it's just because you just have too little faith in the holy name and the effect, because it will eventually have it."
Well, I have faith in reality.
Yeah.
You see, but again, he's believing something which is not our philosophy. Prabhupada himself, at the very end, a few days before he left this world, there's this very famous story where where Giriraj Swami was visiting. You know the story? I asked Giriraj to tell me the story 5 times. I want to make sure I got it right. And he even wrote it down for me. In the middle of the night, Prabhupada sent his servant to call Giriraj. This was just before Prabhupada left. And so Giriraj ran to Prabhupada's room. It was all very dark. There was one little candle. And Prabhupada called him over. And Prabhupada was so weak, his body was so weak, that Giriraj had to put his ear right next to Prabhupada's lips. And Prabhupada said to him, "When I am gone, when I leave this world, will this movement go on? Will it survive?" And Giriraj, as he explains it, gave the standard company answer, "Yes, Prabhupada, if we chant Hare Krishna and follow the principles." In other words, it's automatic. If we chant Hare Krishna and follow the principles. And Prabhupada indicated no. He said there must be intelligence and organization. And what we're finding is, in the real world, it doesn't work. Sure, there's some effect. I'm not saying there's nothing. And I see on YouTube these sort of tragic, comic scenes, from the Hare Krishna movement, where they'll be doing, Harinam, chanting Hare Krishna in the streets of some European city or Australia or somewhere, and clearly it's like tangible evidence of parallel worlds, because on the one hand the devotees are jubilant, triumphant, beating the drums and dancing, and you can just see they're totally triumphant. We're saving the world. And no one's stopping. People are walking by like this. And the devotees are completely oblivious to the people's reaction. You see, I think it's actually impersonal. I think that if my attitude toward the public is, you're not really persons, or you're so un-Krishna conscious, you're so much an illusion, that you're just, you're a moron. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you like or dislike. It doesn't matter anything. You are simply here to be involuntarily liberated.
Charlie, what about the example of Lord Chaitanya, who went out in a context of West Bengal which was unfavorable to Krishna Bhakti, and he went out on
Actually, it was very favorable. Actually, wherever he went, huge crowds followed him. It was the powers, it was the people that were losing their power because he was gaining power that tried to stop him, not the people. But I think that Krishna is not pleased when we don't care about people. We don't take them seriously. Even God himself, according to Bhagavad Gita, reciprocates. So if you don't care what they think, guess what? The world doesn't care what we think. We don't respect them, and guess what? The world doesn't respect us. People are reciprocating our contempt for them. Because for us, they're not really people. They're just a philosophical category. They're the fruit of workers, or the conditioned souls. If you open a restaurant, say like a Govinda's restaurant, you don't say, well, I'm going to cook this because I like to cook it, and no one buys it. There are no customers, but this is what I want to cook. It's madness. You cook what people want. Sure, within our standards. It's spiritual food, we offer it. By the way, most of the Mahaprasada we have is not even in the mode of goodness, according to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita says food in the mode of goodness is healthy. If you live on Mahaprasadam, you'll die very young. So the point is that how can they not reciprocate? We don't respect them. We don't care what their feelings are. We're triumphant. We just take it, you know. It's very impersonal. It's very disrespectful. So why not approach music the way we approach food? Why not say, let's present kirtan in a way that the public will buy it, they'll want it, why not do that? It's funny, we don't make money on Harinam. We don't make money when we go out to chant, but we do make money in restaurants. So if there's money involved, we care about the public. And if there's no money involved, we don't care about them. Admirable. But of course, it's the greatest offense is to ever criticize ourselves. And, you know, when you get a group of people, if you get a culture where you don't criticize the group, you're going to have serious problems. Not out of envy, not with malice, but we have to be self-critical. I mean, every successful company, every morning they meet, you know, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What are the customers saying? What are the sales figures? Look at us in the Western world. We're nothing. I mean, there's a lot of great devotees, you know, you're all wonderful devotees, but in terms of Prabhupada's dreams and hopes and what he told me personally so many times, we have to change the world. We have to establish Krishna consciousness as an important movement. We failed. And so what do you do if you fail for over a third of a century? You do exactly the same thing. I mean, the fact that we failed for 35 years to make any progress whatsoever, I mean, why would you change anything? And so there's all these philosophical mistakes. There's an exaggeration of the power of Agyata Sukriti. And there's another major philosophical problem. And that is, there are two distinct categories which come right from Rupa Goswami, chapter 6, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. As Prabhupada presents it, there are basic principles that you can't change, like chant Hare Krishna, worship Krishna, read the Bhagavatam. Rupa Goswami gives a list of all these accepted guru basic principles. And then Prabhupada says, and Rupa Goswami says, there are other rules which are not basic. They're just details. And Prabhupada says, you can change them. They're not basic. Now, there are many devotees who have merged these two categories. When you do that, you destroy the science. You know, there is a medical science in the world, but if there's no real doctor, that won't help you. So the devotees, many devotees, have merged these two categories. So that dressing like an Indian, and that's all it is, dressing like an Indian somehow has become a fundamental principle of bhakti yoga.
Or dressing like Krishna supposedly dresses.
Yeah, as if Krishna said in the Gita, dress like me. And as if we knew how Krishna dressed, because it's not in the scriptures. It only says he likes yellow. You know, it's kind of his statement. Blue body, yellow clothes. But as if we knew. So it's not a basic principle. And yet people treat it as if it is. And by doing so, they destroyed the science. So I'm saying, why don't we actually, you know, it's like they say in America, if everything else fails, read the instructions. And so, you know, it's very clear in our teachings that dress, cuisine, what recipes you, it's all details. The principle that Krishna teaches is not, you know, offer me Indian food. Krishna, it's things in goodness. So it's very interesting because, for example, we have basically replaced Krishna's criteria with our own. Krishna says the cultural criteria is goodness, dress in goodness, decent, virtuous, food which is healthy. And then that sattva, you offer that sattva to Krishna, it becomes Shuddha sattva. That's our philosophy, little known. So, but they've replaced it. They've taken away Krishna's scientific, objective, self-evident teaching. Live a virtuous life in all you do, and offer that to Krishna. And instead, it's live an Indian life. That has become the criteria. So much so that devotees, some of them, have completely lost their, as we say in America, their marbles. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a Rath Yatra in Melbourne, Australia. And at the stage show, the parade ended and they were having the show on the stage. And they had a group from Bollywood, men and women, and they danced and sang. And the dancing was, especially the women actually, was the only word you could use was, you have to say the dancing was, it was highly erotic. It was highly erotic. I mean, really. I mean, if they could go straight from that Rath Yatra to Las Vegas. Very erotic dancing, the way they were, pushing their bodies out and everything. And everyone was okay with it. It was totally not in goodness. It was not virtuous. But it was Indian, and that's all that matters. So, for example, there was recently a big Gurukuli wedding in New Vrindavan. And so all the friends of the guy who was getting married, they all dressed up, they all like all the same. It was like really decked out. And they all dressed up like these really nice Muslim princes. And they thought they were preserving Vedic culture by dressing like Muslims. But I have nothing problem with Muslims, the ones that don't kill you. But it was just they were like Muslim princes. We even have posters. There's Indian posters of Krishna who's dressed like a Muslim prince. It doesn't matter. It's Indian, and that's all that matters. So Krishna says, it's better food and goodness, food that's healthy, that prolongs your life, which is the word for duration of life is ayur, is an Ayurveda. So it doesn't matter if the food is unhealthy. It's Indian, and therefore that's what Krishna wants. He doesn't want healthy Western food. He wants unhealthy Indian food. Because Krishna is ethnically Indian. And the spiritual world is just that big India up in the sky. That may strike some people as a spiritual science, but I don't think so. I think the reason this movement cannot grow in the Western world, which it doesn't in over a third of a century, it's actually, I don't want to say it's shrinking, but it's certainly not growing. And it has shrunk. I mean, it's tiny compared to what it was. I think, frankly, if I can just be honest and treat you like adults, which I know is not really appropriate, for a sannyasi to treat other people as adults, but I think that ISKCON is presenting to the world a combination of spiritual science and mythology. And the mythology, in other words, if someone says, I feel more Krishna conscious when I wear this Indian dress, I'd say, great, but you're right. But it's not spiritual. It's just cotton. It's just cotton or silk or whatever. And even if you say Krishna wore dhoti 5,000 years ago, for which we have no evidence, because the word dhoti is not a Sanskrit word and is not found in any scripture. But even if someone thinks that's the case, Kunti Devi says in her prayers about Krishna, she says to Krishna that when you come to this world, you come nato natya dharojata, you come like an actor in costume. So even if we knew Krishna wore a dhoti, which we absolutely don't know, Kunti Devi says you come like an actor in costume. And we know that what Krishna does, either as Chaitanya or Krishna, is he fits into his society. It's really funny because all these things, Bhakti Siddhanta is fitting into a society, and then we fit into the world he fit into. It's, if you want to follow the acharyas, why don't you fit into your world? Because that's what they did. And Prabhupada actually fit in. Prabhupada came in the 60s. India was magical. I mean, India had more mystique than the Mona Lisa, in the 60s. And to actually every Indian guru or swami that came to America that had even that much charisma made so many followers. There was one little guy, he was like a little clown. His name was Guru Maharaji. And he, eventually stopped pretending he was a guru. But anyway, he filled up the Astrodome. It's his football stadium. that seats like 80, 100,000 people. We couldn't do that. There were so many gurus. It was the time. If you were had an Indian guru and all that, people liked it. And so Prabhupada, you have to remember, when Prabhupada was here, we were winning. Now we're losing. Who can say that if Prabhupada came back now and he wouldn't even recognize his temples compared to what they were, that he would say, oh, everything collapsed, movement's not growing, we're irrelevant. Oh, don't change, just do this exactly the same thing.
Have more.
Is everything else, like I was just thinking, things like initiation?
No, everything's the same. Everything's the same. That's the whole point. You see, this is...
Principles and stuff.
Of course.
Because that's what people will ask straight away.
I know, because the spiritual science has been lost and forgotten. We have developed this mythological, irrational conviction, so many devotees, that superficial, trivial things are basic principles of Bhakti Yoga. Well, if you're not going to wear a dhoti, maybe you're not going to be vegetarian either. It's like, oh my God. They're just... But that's how their minds work. Because they've taken all these superficial things like how you dress, and, do you listen to the right kind of music? Like, you don't listen to Indian music? You don't cook Indian recipes? They've taken all this stuff and they've thrown it into the fundamental rule category. It's on the same level as chant Hare Krishna, follow the principles. They put it on the same level. Which means they have basically misunderstood the spiritual science. So of course, Prabhupada made very clear what you can't change and what you can. And everything that Prabhupada said not to change, we don't change.
So Krishna West is not just for people that aren't... It's not just for new people. I mean, it's
no.
That's the other thing I've heard is that it's for people who won't be attracted, to going into the temple and things like that. But this is for the other people who, we need something for them. So
it's for Western people. Yeah. It's for Western people that don't simply want to be Indians. They want to serve Krishna, but they don't want, because I'm not Indian. I'm from California. I have like zero desire to be Indian. I'm not. It's interesting because for many of these people in ISKCON, the Gaudiya Math is worse, but for many of these people, you're not your body, but you are your clothes. So my point is, something? You actually are your body more than you are your clothes. Because the body is actually closer to the soul than the clothes. So you're not your body, but you are your clothes. It's wacky. It's wacky. I believe, after a lifetime study of history of religions, history of ISKCON, our scriptures, Prabhupada, after almost half a century of study, and, academically also, I am convinced that if we are to succeed, it will be this way. And I don't mean to dictate every detail. I don't want to manage anyone. It's like, please don't ask me to manage your life. It's just, I'm trying to just give these ideas. Because there's no way in the world, as far as I can see, that this heavy Indian, it's really just Indian chauvinism. Because something may be Turkish, it may come from Saudi Arabia, it may just come from Pakistan, it may come from here, from there, God knows where it comes from, but if it's Indian, it's Vedic. Frankly, it's just very irrational.
So when I saw you 20 years back...
Oh my God, I must have been like 19 or something. Saw me as a teenager.
You were dressed. I just remember you in flowing robes,
Oh yes.
So what happened? Like, what is it in your journey? Like, what?
I
mean, when did
don't know. I
realize
took
that,
the blue pill.
You know?
No, it's like that opening scene in Matrix. I always knew something was wrong with the system. What happened? Okay, yeah, you're right. I was completely I was completely like, if you go out of the temple and you're going to, buy some butter in the store, put your dhoti on. Don't. I was what?
Don't compromise.
Yeah, I was totally there. What happened? Krishna bumped me out of that. I got the detachment I needed, because you can't really be objective unless you have some level of detachment. And then I got the tools I needed, the intellectual tools. And I was always kind of like the Wunderkind, when I was young in college and in history and all that stuff, analysis. And I just began to discover in the Hare Krishna movement this huge amount of irrationality. Not in Prabhupada, not in our philosophy, not in anything that really matters. I remained completely committed to my spiritual practice, to Prabhupada. And even to ISKCON, because I never saw ISKCON as belonging to the GBC. I always saw it as belonging to Prabhupada. And so yeah, it didn't affect my faith or my devotion to Prabhupada or Krishna, or even to ISKCON. Because I knew that ISKCON was, you don't reject a country because you have a bad government at a certain time in history. And so I began to discover that there was a real spiritual science here, and that was my life, that real spiritual science, which I learned from Prabhupada, but that it's like Lord Chaitanya gives the example that spiritual life is like a garden, the devotional creeper that produces fruits and flowers, and so weeds grow in the garden. So I realized that weeds grow not only individually, but weeds can grow in a society. There can be social weeds, and there can be community weeds. And I saw that ISKCON, because of its commitment to never criticizing ISKCON, because there were all these weeds, and there was a huge amount of just irrational stuff going on. Superstition, mythology, mixed in with the spiritual science. It's like Chandrasekhar the other day. We were just in a hotel, and so we had to cut some bread or cut some cheese or something. I'm actually a vegan in America, but when I travel, sometimes I'm starving to death because I can't get the food I want. So to save my life, I've been eating cheese. But so he handed me a knife, and I used it, and I handed it back to him. And he laughed, and he said, some ISKCON leader, sannyasi, told him that in India, if you give someone a knife, what happens?
You start to argue or fight.
It's something you do with enemies.
You have to put it down.
Yeah, and so India is like the ocean of superstition, and everything is, oh my God, you sneeze, and it's Wednesday before 12 o'clock. You have to turn around 2 times toward the left and throw pepper over your right shoulder and say Abba Dabba Doo or something. It's what it's like. It's just, it's just extremely ritualistic culture, very ritualistic, very superstitious. And it wasn't like that when I joined the movement. It wasn't like that. When Prabhupada actually, personally was with everyone, it wasn't like that. It was this clean, simple, Scandinavian, kind of like, clean design. It was this very clean, simple spiritual science. And if you look at pictures of Prabhupada in the early days of the movement, his leading followers were wearing Western clothes. And for me, there's actually a golden age of ISKCON. When Prabhupada lived in the West, he actually had no intention of going back to India. And it really was a Western movement. And the relationship between Prabhupada and his disciples was different, even than it is now, in the sense that Prabhupada wasn't a remote, mythologized figure. He was just Prabhupada. He was the pure devotee. He was Krishna's representative. But it wasn't mythologized like whatever Prabhupada says on any material subject, he's omniscient. Which Prabhupada, when someone asked Prabhupada, are you omniscient or infallible in material things? Prabhupada thought, that's really a stupid question. Of course not, I'm not God. And, one of Prabhupada's, secretaries told me that one devotee kept asking Prabhupada about some material thing, and Prabhupada said, how do I know? I'm not God. But so rather than having this mythologized Prabhupada, we had the real Prabhupada. who's a really great guy and a pure devotee of Krishna and Krishna's representative. So the relationship with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, if you read Mukunda Goswami's book, it's a great book, you see very clearly Prabhupada's attitude toward, say, his American disciples was, it's your country, you figure out how to preach there. Mm-hmm. And there's that story from Sweden I just heard. When Prabhupada went to Sweden, he told the devotees, I don't understand your country, you figure it out.
Submit to Krishna.
Yeah. So Prabhupada took the role of, the spiritual teacher. As far as practical strategy, you figure it out, it's your country. Instead of, no, Prabhupada said you have to dress like this, and you have to do this. And so you see Prabhupada walking with his leading disciples back then, they're wearing Western clothes. And then, things changed. I mean, I go through the whole history. Why it changed. Prabhupada went back to India. The movement grew. Prabhupada became more remote. We started to get this massive chauvinistic Indian influence, especially from white Hindus, in the sense that, no, in India they do this, in India they do that. And Prabhupada at the time, if you look at Prabhupada's purport in 4854, it's at that time when the Indian influence is growing, and Prabhupada's fighting against it. And he's saying you can't do things in the West like in India. But no one hears him. No one quotes that. No one quotes that statement of Prabhupada because it doesn't make us better than everyone else. It actually shows respect for the West, and therefore it never caught on, never became popular. In 1970, when Prabhupada bought the first temple, it's the first time we really bought a temple, it's in Los Angeles, on La Cienega Boulevard. No, I'm sorry. Watsika, yeah, the one we had. Before that, they were in Los Angeles, and they bought the one on Watsika. And so you see Prabhupada trying to be Western, and his American disciples trying to be Indian. They bought an old church. I think it was an old Methodist church. Nice, typical, sort of like American-style Protestant church. And there was this big, beautiful sanctuary that had been the church. So the devotee said, yeah, we'll put the deities here. Prabhupada said, no. There was another room, which was smaller, not nearly as elegant. And Prabhupada said, we'll make the temple there. Why? Because he said, I want the Americans to feel comfortable and sit on the pews, the church benches, and be in their own culture. And so what happened? A couple of years later, the leader in LA disobeyed Prabhupada and moved the deities. That was Jayatirtha, who of course fell down. So you see Prabhupada trying to be Western, and against his wishes, his disciples trying to be Indian.
Ripped out the pews?
Yeah, of course. It's the present temple room. So, Prabhupada can say, oh, I like dhotis, or wear dhoti, and then he'll say again and again, clothes don't matter, it has nothing to do with the soul. Clothes are a dead thing. We want living consciousness. And no matter how many times Prabhupada says that, all of those statements are forgotten. They're lost. No one repeats them. But what do they say? No, Prabhupada said he likes dhotis. And so what you can see in ISKCON, and I'm a member of ISKCON actually, I'm speaking as someone who is committed to ISKCON, that you have this filter. Prabhupada is filtered, and he always was. Not philosophically, we know the philosophy. But in terms of the practical details, Prabhupada is filtered. And so basically what happened is that we have these conservative managers, and that's what the GBC are. They're managers. That's the word Prabhupada used. In his will, the ultimate managing authority. They're not God on earth. They're managers. And you have these sort of conservative managers who have sort of, dominate the GBC, and they filter out all these things Prabhupada said, and you have all these leaders going around, no, Prabhupada said we should dress like this. Prabhupada said we should do that. And what I'm saying is, let's follow all of Prabhupada. So all I'm doing in Krishna West is reactivating Prabhupada's own statements. I'm bringing back to our consciousness all these things. Prabhupada gave us the freedom and the flexibility to make this movement work in the West. Prabhupada actually gave us that freedom. But all the statements giving that freedom have been filtered out. They're not preached. And therefore devotees think they're stuck in this failed paradigm where you try to make the Western world Indian. It's a failure. It has failed. It's a third of a century, maybe half a century. Do you want to wait 2 centuries? I mean, it failed. It's a failure. The 60s are over. You know, it's over. We're preaching to a world that stopped existing 40 years ago. And groups that are preaching to the world today are growing. For example, in France, our movement is just like, it's not even life support, it's kind of like, it's just, you know, I mean, the movement in France is just like, it's just barely breathing. And I have a friend, actually, who's, she's like, they don't say sannyasini, but she's a leader in this group called the Brahma Kumaris. They follow the same principles we do, 4 regular principles, no onion and garlic. And they're actually even more strict than us because, well, not strict, but I would say a little dogmatic, but you can't live in their centers or be a leader unless you're celibate. I mean, you know, we're fine with married people that have children and all that, but you have to be celibate. And in France, they have 20 centers. They're all over France. And you could say, well, that's because of our principles. No, they have the same principles we do. And their theology is actually a little goofy, but I mean, they do believe in a personal God, and this personal God, the soul, reincarnation, no onion and garlic. Oh my God. That was the biggest sacrifice I made when I joined this movement. All those great salad dressings that we can't eat. And I still love salad. Oh my God. It's almost like an unnatural austerity. So, they have all the same principles. And they're growing. They're just totally successful in France. And the Hare Krishna movement in France is India, 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 and it's a complete failure. Just like a total failure.
Just the other day, Madhavananda, he said in a class that Bhaktisiddhanta actually served meat to like these leaders to actually invite them in, because that's the only way he was going to be able to.
Yeah.
Them.
And if I just serve like pants, you know, a pair of pants, you know, they want to hang me from the highest tree. I mean, because some boys actually probably think that pants are more sinful than meat. So that's based anyway. Sorry to harass you about all these things, but
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's Krishna West. We can actually be successful in the West. This can actually be a powerful movement. I went to Lithuania, 2.9 million people, 500 devotees. It was amazing. And I just had a vision. Imagine if we really started winning. What if people started joining? What if we had famous people in Denmark and Germany and France and America, like famous people singing, speaking, and it grew and grew, and actually, it's like that great hymn, the song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And so, it could actually work because it's this whole thing, dhotis and everything, it's not Vedic, it was the 60s. It attracted hippies. And the fact that we go out in public places dressed in a way which for almost everyone is just bizarre and ridiculous. And nothing's happening, the movement can't grow, and you have leaders that say, no, this is the spiritual world on earth. It's just... it's just bizarre.
If you had a program at one of your centers, and then a devotee from that liked to wear devotional dress went to the program.
Well, I would tell them this.
Thrown out? I
would say, why not mutual respect? For example, whenever I go to Hare Krishna temples, did I tell you that I actually go to Hare Krishna temples? Whenever I go to Hare Krishna temples, I dress according to their standards. I dress according to their standards. Because my mother taught me that, respect other people when you go to their house. And so why don't they reciprocate that respect? I'll tell you what, because they still have this lingering view that they're the real devotees, and that's the real Krishna consciousness. So I can rise up to their standard, but they won't lower themselves to our standards. Why not mutual respect? It's funny because I was in Berlin, and I mean, whenever I go to the temples, traditional temples as I call them, whenever I go to these traditional temples, of course, you know, I dhoti up. I put my dhoti on, and you know, my Arab shirt, so they'll be happy. And so when I was in Berlin, the temple president's really nice guy, really good. Sadashiva, do you know him? In Berlin? His wife's really nice too. Anyway, really nice devotee, really intelligent, loves Krishna West, wants to work with me. And so when I got to the temple, it's just, you know, it's not a big temple. I said, oh, I can put a dhoti on. I actually brought my dhoti, and I said, I put my dhoti on. He said, no, it's fine, just go speak. So I did. And that was my agreement with the GBC, that I would follow the standard of the temples wherever I went. And oh my God, that, you know, the leaders were talking about it. He was in Berlin, he did. It's so funny. It's like they almost care more about how I'm dressed than about Krishna. So in answer to your question, I believe in mutual respect. You see, I've gotten to a point where I'm not going to live in the ISKCON underground. I'm not going to have a life where, okay, all the conservatives who know almost nothing about Vaishnava history and who have filtered out half of what Prabhupada said, you own ISKCON. You own ISKCON, it's yours, and we're just the underground. You know, we're the second-class citizens, and we kind of in the shadows, but you own ISKCON, you own the brand, you own the public image, you're the bona fide devotees. Hell no. No, that's not going to be. I respect them, but they have to reciprocate. They have to reciprocate. And that's what I'm fighting for, actually. Because, for example, a couple days ago, I spoke to a disciple of mine. Her and her husband are my disciples. They live in Cordoba, Argentina, and which is one of the big cities in Argentina. So she went to the local Vyas Puja thing. It's not even a formal temple. It's just like Namahatta. And she was dressed nicely, not in a sari, which some scholars feel originally was Muslim dress. But she wasn't dressed in a sari. And, but, you know, very respectable, dressed very nicely. And after they offered the ghee lamp, you know, the lamp, she went to take it around. They would not allow her to touch the ghee lamp. And this is an initiated devotee, faithful, very respectable, educated lady. They would not allow her to take the ghee lamp around. Chandrasekhar wanted to put a garland on Prabhupada in Los Angeles. He wasn't allowed to put a garland on Prabhupada. He's just like a gentleman. You know, he's from Paris. He's always decked out. They wouldn't allow him to put a garland on. And he was chastised in New Mayapur because I asked him to lead a kirtan. Actually, it was my fault. And he he's dressed nicely, but so that double standard is not okay. And the reason I care about it, if it was just for my pride, then it would be it would be childish. It's not my pride. It's about saving the Hare Krishna movement from fanaticism, dogmatism, abuse, offenses against sincere. Because I'm the poster boy for Krishna West. You know, everyone knows that I am, you know, on this. I'm out of control of Krishna West, and so where, you know, people write to me. So many people write to me because they know that if they tell the regular ISKCON authorities, they'll be chastised, humiliated, kicked out. But they write to me, and they have these horror stories of how they've been treated because they didn't want to be Indian. So the answer to your question is, to quote an American saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The gander is the male goose. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So there has to be, it's like law. That's what it means to have a society governed by law, not governed by the whims of leaders. That's despotism. That's tyranny. There has to be the rule of objective, fair law. And the law applies equally to everyone. So if the rule is that when you go to an ISKCON project, you respect the standards of that project, then that's the rule for everyone. I mean, I think that's fair, isn't it? And if someone said to me, no, if you come to our temple, dress how you like, then I'd tell them, dress as you like. Well, I probably made enough propaganda. I don't want to keep beating you over the head with this stuff, but there is something at stake. Oh, I know. The reason I'm criticizing is because the minute you let it under your skin, then you begin to make it better. It's really true. If you never see the problem, if you never admit it, I'm serving ISKCON. I don't want to say I'm trying to save ISKCON. That sounds very pretentious, but there's a major problem. The West is not one of the regions of the world, like someone's preaching in Indonesia, someone's preaching in Bolivia, and someone's preaching in the West. It's not that. Prabhupada made it very clear, it's obvious anyway, that as the West goes, so goes the world. And, for example, the movement in India is incredibly successful, and the rest of the world could not care less. The movement is very successful in Russia, although there are limits. I talked to some of the leaders there. They don't make high-class devotees. There's a dirty little secret about the great success in Russia. In Russia, there's two Russias. There are the people that vote for Putin, and then there's the educated people. And anyway, our devotees tend to come from the wrong group. So, but anyway, the point is that if the move is not successful in the West, Prabhupada's global strategy collapses. Prabhupada had an explicit strategy, which he told me 1 million times. And that was, we have to be successful in the West. We're not. We're not successful in the West. And so, literally, the world depends on it. The movement, after Lord Chaitanya came, he brought a whole army of pure devotees. And the movement went on great for a while. It was a big success. And then it collapsed and it was gone for a century or two. History repeats itself. I mean, we shouldn't think that we're automatically going to go on. What if it kind of disappears in the West for a couple hundred years? It's kind of going in that direction. So these are very serious issues. I mean, that's why I'm bothering everybody. Because sometimes I say, there's 5 sinful activities in ISKCON. The 5th one is thinking. It's kind of this culture where you don't think, don't speculate, just... But actually, when Prabhupada said don't speculate, he was talking about philosophy, not practical strategy. Last point, and I promise I will leave you alone. Last point, and that is, when Prabhupada first came, you have to understand, the whole time that Prabhupada was here, ISKCON was almost exclusively an ashram movement. Mm. When Prabhupada was here, if you left the ashram, you basically had given up spiritual life, you left the Hare Krishna movement, you betrayed everything sacred, just because you moved out of an ashram. I mean, but Prabhupada was here, the whole time Prabhupada was here, everyone in ISKCON lived in an ashram. There was no congregation. And so a lot of things Prabhupada was saying was just for ashrams. Also, it was working. It was succeeding. And then when Prabhupada left, even before Prabhupada left, the last year or two, if you look at the numbers, it was up, 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 and then it was starting to go down. Because the world was changing. The world was changing. So, but there is something at stake. That's the point. There is something at stake here. There are real historical dangers. And that's why it's urgent that we try to revive the Western Hare Krishna movement.
Especially for our generation, because imagine the next will not have the association of like devotees like you that had the association of Srila Prabhupada. So I think it's, for me at least, I really want to get the training so that when my guru leaves and you guys are not here anymore, we can carry on,
Good girl. Yeah, you should be.
It's scary to think we won't have that guidance. We need to.
Well, then you have to be a leader. No, we need men and women who are leaders, actually. It's like, yeah, I mean, anyone can step forward and be a leader. It really is irrelevant what kind of body you have.
Yeah. But we also need the confidence, I feel like, because we don't need it that much, when we go into...
That's the point, you see, because frankly we don't have so many real leaders. Yeah. A real leader never looks for followers. A real leader looks for leaders. If you're a manager, you just want everyone to do their job. Don't just do what I tell you because you're a manager. But if you're a preacher, you're looking for leaders, not followers. So everyone, man, woman, anyone can become a leader. Anyone can become a powerful preacher. So do it. You're intelligent. You're Krishna conscious.
That was one of the first things my guru said, because I was very shy. He said, you have to get over it. It's a good quality for a woman, but you have to get over it because you need to preach. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's also this kind of like this stereotype of what a Vedic woman is, which is pretty mythological. For example, if you look at the Mahabharata, Pandavas, Krishna, they actually had vacation areas. There were actually vacation places back then, and they would go down. They go down the Jamuna River in the summer from Indraprastha, and they had this big festival with all the royal family and friends. And it said the women, like what they were doing kind of for fun, they were having wrestling contests. So much for the Vedic lady. I'm sorry, Prabhu. It's they're having wrestling contests, and Subhadra, for example, was expert at driving a war chariot. So all this stuff, it's like there's so much stuff that's just Indian. It's not Vedic. For example, Maharaj. If you look at scripts, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, no one ever calls sannyasi Maharaj. It's for kings. It's not a name for a sannyasi, but it's just Hindu tradition. Or women covering their hair. Women don't cover their hair in Vedic culture. It's not in the Bhagavatam. Or calling women Mataji. It's another thing that just drives me nuts, this Mataji thing. First of all, because it's Hindi, and I'm not in love with Hindi. And also because, actually in Sanskrit, if you addressed your mother, you would say Mater.
Actually, my father was asking about cinnamon, things to call instead, because I was... Yeah,
one of the things I point out is that people actually have names. And...
what to call them?
What?
No, what to call them? What should I call them?
Yeah. Most of the time, people just call each other by their names. That's what they do most of the time, men or women. And then... they have some nice little things they say to women, like they'll say Shubhe, which means something like good woman or good lady, or like Bhadre, like from the word Bhadra, like Subhadra. So, but not. If you look at the Bhagavatam, you do not find that men call women mother. It's just not in the Bhagavatam. You don't even find it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is even recent. And so this idea, that's Vedic. Why? Because Chanakya Pandit made one remark. First of all, Chanakya Pandit is not an acharya and he's not scripture. He's a political advisor. He's very clever. And the reason women are called mother is because of this, frankly, this kind of scary idea that men and women are so just ridiculously lusty that the only way to stop them from jumping on each other is to raise the image of incest, the most horrible kind of incest. And I just, I don't know, to me, I call someone mother because she is my mother. And there are other relationships say there's some elder, like a woman who's older than me and treats me like a mother, but I still wouldn't call her mother, because that's the culture I grew up in. I call my mother mother. And so, yeah, calling every woman mother, to me, I find it actually a little, what's the word?
I think it's condescending.
Yes, condescending. It's like saying to a woman that the only way you can be respectable is as a mother. You can't be respectable as a teacher, as a scholar, as a leader. The only respectable position for you is as a mother. And I think that's nonsense. Actually, and I'm also not like a feminist in the sense that I don't believe in ideology. I believe you encourage everyone to serve Krishna according to their abilities and their propensities. And that's it. You don't have to, like hit people with ideology. Just encourage them and they'll end up where they're supposed to be. And so, yeah, I mean, if a woman actually has the qualities of a leader and is not allowed to be a leader or a guru, then you're committing violence against her. Because according to all the Bhagavad Gita, the only way you can control your senses is by engaging yourself, engaging your nature. And Krishna says twice, it is dangerous to do another's duty. And since your duty, as Krishna explains over and over again, is born of your nature, it's your nature that defines your duty. Not that, well, you're a woman and this is your duty, therefore you have to have that nature. That's actually getting the Gita backwards. Krishna says, you're born with a nature, and that will determine your duty. And it's dangerous not to do your duty because it comes from you're denying yourself. You're denying your own nature. And therefore, if a woman has the nature, for example, to be a leader or a guru, if a woman has that nature and she's not allowed to do it, then the men, in the name of protecting her, are actually putting her in danger. They're doing exactly the opposite. In the name of protecting the woman, they're actually putting her in danger because they're not allowing her to serve Krishna according to her nature, and therefore they're denying her her natural right to perform her duty. And Krishna says, karma nyeva dhikarate. You have a right to your duty. So you see, they've actually got it backwards. They've actually got it backwards. There's even one ISKCON sannyasi and guru that preaches that women have no varna. They just take the man's varna.
Oh my God.
I know, which is just, it's like madness because the whole Manu Samhita is just about varna sankara, mixing varnas. How can you mix varnas if a woman has no varna? And so in all the Vedic literatures, women, there's the Brahmani, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, the Shudrani. How could you have varna mixing if women don't have a varna? Of course they have varnas. They have varnas in every scripture. And yet this devotee, he preaches this. And he has a Varnashram blog. So the point is that if I told Prabhupada all these troubles, Prabhupada would say to me, I know what he would say, fix it. We can't just turn ISKCON over to people who, in my view, are not allowing ISKCON to grow. We have to, in a ladylike, gentlemanly way within Vaishnava etiquette, we have to do what's best for ISKCON, for Prabhupada. So, thank you all very much.
That's all right.
Oh, Krishna. Well, my mother always said I would have been a good lawyer.